Hey, I'm Gabby, also known as Señorita Gavita. Welcome back or welcome if you are new here. Today's video will be a tutorial. I will show you how I use my iPad and Procreate to create this type of digital artworks. I will also show you how I set up the drawing files because all my digital illustration will be for stickers and prints, so I have to keep in mind some specific settings for it as well. Then I will show you my brushes because I always try to make a traditional vibe into my digital artwork, so I have some special brushes for it. I will also show you the whole drawing process. I will take you with me how I draw an illustration. I will show you some tips and tricks, and yes, let's dive into the tutorial. So let's start with the Procreate setup. As I said, I'm using my iPad Pro. I think I got it 2018, so it's a little bit old, but it still works. And I have the Apple Pencil second generation. And now we are already into Procreate, and I have a lot of files. As you can see, this is another problem for myself, that I have to go through all the files and make some organization. But you can see on the right corner there's a plus, and there you can pick up your preferred file size. I'm using the square file, and it is 3000 to 3000 pixels. And then on the left corner you go to canvas, and there will be other settings. I go to crop and resize, and then the settings, and I do 300 dpi because most of the times my illustration end into an art print or stickers, so I need a high resolution, and 300 dpi works for most of the printed products that you want to use. And then when I start my digital illustration, I have mostly a traditional sketch already, and I transferred into my Procreate. I already took a picture with my iPhone, but you also can take a picture with your iPad, but I don't know, it doesn't work for me at the moment. I think because maybe it's a bug, so I have to take the picture with my iPhone and then I can edit in Procreate. Then I'm sizing it in the right size that I want to have the final illustration. And I'm doing this with the arrow icon that you can see on the top side. And I'm using then my thumb and index finger to size it down or up. And the other shortcut that you can use with your fingers is tapping on the screen with 2 fingers, then you move a step back, and then with 3 fingers you are moving a step forward. Then when I'm pressing a little bit longer with my index finger on the screen, I'm opening up the quick menu, and there you can add, for example, I'm doing all my favorite brushes that I want to use into this quick menu, so I can very quickly pick up the right brushes that I want to use instead of going to the right side of the screen to the brush menu and scrolling all the brushes that I have to find the right one. So I'm doing this for each art supplies that I want to mimic in my illustration. For example, I have a quick up setting with brushes for watercolor, for gouache, or for markers, but you can also add on this 6 buttons different actions. For example, add the redo options, or also open up the reference picture, for example. And there are a lot of options. You can look through and build up your own quick sections. Now I have another tips when you are starting out with drawing traditional. You can go again to canvas, and you can activate the drawing guide, so you will have a guide on your canvas, which can be very helpful. And you can also activate the reference option, and then a second more smaller size window will pop up, and there you can pick up your reference picture, for example. So I don't need to open up a different device to have this reference picture or to have my sketchbook all the time laying on the side, so I have already my reference pictures in the same screen when I'm drawing, and you can move it around where you want to have it. Then we go to preference, where you can have other settings adjust to your liking. For example, that you can see the brush when you are drawing, and there's also the gesture controls that I showed you at the beginning. You can pick up the one do you like. I prefer to make it more minimalistic and only to pick up a few one that I prefer over time. But there's a lot of more options that you can pick up. So take your time going through all the things, and it also will change over time what you prefer using and so on. So it's a long learning process and to experiment with all the settings. But now to the color wheel and palettes. You can find on the right side this circle with the color. You can tap on it, and then you have different options like the disc, the classic, the harmony, value, and palettes. I use mostly the disc because I can move around the color wheel more precisely, but sometimes when I need a more defined color, a little bit more lighter or darker, then I go to harmony, and then you have different slides, for example like the hue, the saturation, or you want to adjust more the red color, so you go to the red color slide, or more blue, and you can see the percentage of each slice that you are adjusting, and also the hexadecimal code for the color that you have created, and you can copy and paste it when you are using it for another illustration. What I also like to do is going to palettes and create my own, because over the time I have my favorite colors, my own color palette, and then I can add all the colors that I really like for my illustration, and then only go to the palette section and pick it up, so I don't need to find in the color wheel the colors that I want to use. You can also create a color palette with a file or from a picture, and then it will convert all the prominent colors of the picture into a color palette and will save it down in Procreate. You can show the color palettes compact, like here, like this tiny little squares, but you can also choose to look up through the color palettes like in cards, and then they will also have some names. Now to the brushes that I'm using. I think I have around 5 or 6 brushes that I really love for my illustration, and the first one is the 6B pencil. It's a Procreate brush that you have already, and I use it mostly for doing my sketches, the pre-sketch, then later the line art and adding the highlights. It has a very smooth, lightly textural look. And you can also adjust in the brush setting the streamline, how much you want to have the stabilization. So that's why I have a few different 6B pencils. One is with more stabilization, one with less, and then I can decide which one I want to use. So I have the demonstration how this brush looks like. So the second brush that I really love to use is from Freya. She's an artist in both a gouache and a watercolor brush set. You can find her on Instagram, and I'm using here the gouache Thin 13. And I'm using this brush mostly for laying down the base color on my illustration. You can see it has a more textural look, and as the name say, it tries to be like a gouache brush, and I really love this texture and traditional look of it. And you can layer down the colors really pretty, and I love to have in my illustration always like a little bit more texture. It should have the look and the vibe of a traditional illustration. So that's why I'm always looking through brushes that have a texture. And also you can see when you are resizing the brush that you can create different looks for your illustration. The other two brushes that I really like to use are the marker under texture, size M, and the over texture. Also from an artist, I will write down the name on the screen because I forgot her name. And it's like a alcohol marker brush with a very fine grainy texture, and I'm used sometimes when I want to have like a alcohol marker digital illustration. I'm using this brush, and then with the over texture I'm adding on my illustration in the end also some warm lights, and I really like the soft look of this brush. The next one is a crayon looking brush, and I'm using this only for adding the blush on the cheeks of my characters. But sometimes I also use it for, I don't know, for the background or adding some texture on stones and so on. As you can see, when you are drawing directly with the nib of the pen, it looks different as you are using the pencil more in a different angle. You can play around with the Apple pencil, adding more pressure, or you are drawing more with a lighter hand. So it's very fun to use the iPad and the Apple Pencil. I can totally recommend it to you. I have my iPad over 5 years and I love it. I don't regret buying it. And then the last brush that I really like is also from Freya. It's the Wet on Wet size 3 aquarelle or watercolor brush, and you can see it's very fun to use. It's mimicking like adding more water to your colors, to your paint, and it's fun to use. I don't use it that much, but sometimes when I'm drawing more botanical illustration. And the last one isn't actually a brush, it's more like a stamp. It's like a brush where you can customize or personalize your brush. For example, I have there my signature name, Gabita. I'm adding it in all my illustration, and maybe for the next video I can show you how you can create stamps like that with your name or with your character, or creating brushes like a flower pattern. I think I will make a little tutorial how you can create your own stamp. So, but now let's draw. I will take you with me in the drawing process and showing you some little insights how I create my digital drawing with the brushes that I have shown you. I have already placed my sketch on the canvas, and then you can see on the layers windows, I'm clicking on it, and then a second window will slide down, and then I reduce the opacity, and then I move the second layer under the first layer with my sketch, and then I do the rough pre-sketch with the 6B pencil, and I do it very quickly, and I'm using this pre-sketch like a guide for my coloration part. I also have here a tiny tip. When you want to make a circle or very straight lines, you can draw the line and then you tap on the screen with your index finger from your other hand on the screen, and then you can see that you can make curvy lines or straight lines, and also you can make very symmetrical circles or squares and resize them up and down. So you only have to draw the circle like here, tap on the screen with your other finger, and then you can move around and create very geometrical forms. But now I'm finishing with the 6B pencil, the pre-sketch, and then we can move on with the coloring part. So we have finished the pre-sketch, and then I'm adding a third layer, and I'm closing or make the placed sketch, I make it invisible so I don't need it anymore. And then on top of the pre-sketch layer, I have then my layer for the base color. So each different part of my illustration will get a layer. For example, the head of the guinea pig will have a layer, and then the raining coat will get a layer, and then in each layer I'm adding with the gouache thin 13 brush the base color. And as I said, I'm using the pre-sketch layer like a guide, so I see where I have to add the colors, how the character is shaped, and then I'm switching on and off the pre-sketch layer so I can add the colors more precisely. So I will add all the base colors on the different elements of this illustration, and then I will come back when I'm showing you how I do the shadow parts, and I will show you the settings. So now I have all the base colors, as you can see, and each one have their own layer, like the raincoat, the face of the guinea pig, also the ears and the eyes and so on. And then I want to start to do the shadow part, but I also want to make it very easy and more quicker. I'm adding another layer, and you can see when you are tapping on the new layer that you can adjust not only the opacity, but you can also choose from different effects, I will call it. When you are creating a new layer, all the layers are set to normal, as you can see with the letter. Now you can click on it, and then you can see that there are different options like screen, lighten, darker color, color burn, and so on. For my shadows, I'm picking up the multiply setting, and I'm using the same color as the base color. And as the name says, it multiplies the base color on top, and in this way I can create my shadows, and I don't have to look in the color wheel the right color for the shadow part. And this I'm doing with all the other elements. I always click all so that I only drew the shadow part of the face, and I'm not drawing over other elements. I'm also clicking on clipping mask, and that means that all the stuff that you are drawing on this layer will stick on the layer down below. So all the stuff that you have drawn on the layer down below will be like a guidance or like a reference for the layer on top. And then I'm doing this a second time with a new layer, turning it into multiply, clicking on clipping mask, and then I can deepen up the shadow for some parts of the face. I can also reduce the opacity when I think the shadow part is looking too vibrant and too saturated. That's a very easy way to create shadows, and I'm doing this for the whole illustration, like for the feet, the hands, the clothes, the raining coat, and I'm always using the same base color for each part. Sometimes when I'm trying something different, I'm picking another color, for example blue, and I will look up how this will turn out in the end when I'm drawing this with the multiply setting. So you can play around and see how it will work for you. And the same with the multiply I'm doing for the line art. I'm adding a new layer, and I make sure that this layer will be on top of the other layers, because this will be for my line arts. I'm turning this layer also to multiply, and then with my B6 pencil I will start the line art, like here for the nose and mouth part. So I go on and add with multiply all the shadows, and then the line art to define the shapes. As you can see here, I'm using now the crayon brush to add the blush on the cheeks. And one important thing is the order of your layers as well. Because, for example, I'm adding right now the highlights on the eyes, and I have the layer with the highlights on top of the dark circled eyes. But if I'm moving the highlight layers under the eyes, you can't see it. So always the layer on top will be visible and it will cover up the layer down below. So I will move on with the coloration, and I will repeat all the stuff that I mentioned, adding to the base color a new layer, make it to multiply, set it to a clipping mask, adding the shadow part, adding another shadow layer with the same settings, adding the highlights, line art. And when I have finished my character, I merge down all the layers together, and I'm using again my 2 fingers. You can see how I merge them only using my fingers. So very, very cool option from Procreate. Then I'm going, because I want to adjust also the colors, on the right side where you can see this magic stick icon, and I go to color balance. Then I play around with the slides, and I prefer to add more magenta because sometimes my illustrations tend to be very green. Then I can also add a little bit more red or yellow to make the whole illustration more warmer, but it also depends how you prefer it. And then I will save this illustration as PNG, but I will deactivate the layer with the white background because I want to add this new guinea pig into a new canvas. I'm adding first my sketch as guidance, then I will also add the new guinea pig illustration that I did. Now I have it on the right place where I want to have it, and then I can start with the background. And as you can see, I also picked up an old illustration for my color palette because I really like the colors and I want to have the same color scheme in this new illustration. Now I'm using the same brush that I use for the base color and the shadows for the background, but I resize it up so you can see more the texture of the brush. And I'm using it for the sky and for clouds because I really love this texture. I start with a very light blue and then I build up each time the color, adding a more saturated or darker blue shade. And the same goes with the floor or the grass where the guinea pig is standing. And as I did the guinea pig, I'm also doing for each part a layer. So the sky will be on one layer and the floor as well. And for the background, it's where I have most of the fun, I would say, because there I can play around with different settings for the layers. For example, sometimes for adding the bushes, for example, for adding the plants and all the tiny flowers or leaves, I am using also the multiply setting, but I also love to use the setting color burn or color dodge to create different effects. And I play around what I like and also playing around with the opacity of the layers to create an interesting look and also some depth in my illustration. So I can only say to you to play around with all the settings and to find your unique drawing style. One thing that I also really love about digital drawing or with Procreate, because it's very easy to use, is also that you can resize things up very easily, or you can flip them vertical or horizontal, rotate them. As you can see here, I wasn't that satisfied with the size of the rainbows. And here you can see the texture of the gouache brush that I really love for the clouds. You can see the very fine lines. And here I'm also playing around with the pink color, and I'm using here the pin light to make it very, very vibrant, and you can also see a little bit through the color, and also the colors change when you are drawing on the white cloud, for example, or on the blue sky. So it's a very nice way to create some interesting effects. Also with the raindrops, I looked up how I can this semi-translucent look of the raindrops drops with the effects that I can pick up. And I think I stick to soft light. And then I adjusted also the opacity. And then I decided how I want to add the light on my illustration. And I'm using the over texture marker brush. And then I'm deciding if I want to have a soft light, a hard light, or a vivid light. And I go mostly to vivid light. And then I'm also, when I think the light layer is too extreme, I can adjust the opacity. But I really like this glowy effect of this vivid light settings for the light source on my illustrations. Then the last part with the 6B pencil is to add all the highlights with the white color, all the sparkles, the highlights on the plants, on the clouds, and so on. When I have finished the illustration and I'm merging down all the layers together, then I go to the color balance settings, reducing the green color, adding more magenta, red and yellow. But I also go to the gradient map, and there you have a gradient library with different color gradients. And you can pick up the mood that you want to add to your illustration. I'm using mostly the Mystique because I love pink and all the pastel pink colors. And then I play around how much I want to add this gradient to my illustration. I reduce it very, very low, sometimes 5 or 10%, because I only want to have this slightly gradient on my illustration, this light pastel pink color scheme. And then the final part is to add my stamp with my name. And then we have the finished illustration. And I hope this tutorial or this video was kinda helpful for you and that you got an insight how I create my illustration. As I said, the digital drawing part is like the traditional. You have to experiment, to practice, to find your own settings for your brush, your favorite brushes as well, and try out a lot until you have your unique drawing style. And if you want to see another type of tutorial, maybe about traditional art, or you have a question about this tutorial about Procreate, leave them down below. I will be very happy to help you out more. Yes, this is all what I have to say about this video. I hope you like it, and if you like this type of video, don't forget to subscribe, leave the thumb up and push the notification bell. Stay creative, and then I will see you next time. Bye bye.